Let me take you back to the 1950s, a time when the suburbs were blossoming and reputations were as delicate as your grandmother's best china. This was the era where everything was pretty much black and white, including the television. Yet somehow life was painted in the most vividly colorful forms of mid-century modern gossip. Picture a neatly manicured lawn, the smell of freshly baked pie wafting from an open window, and the distant annoyance of a lawnmower perpetually humming somewhere just out of sight. The suburbs of the 1950s were a peculiar little ecosystem where reputations were built or shattered faster than you could say, "Leave it to Beaver." At the heart of every cul-de-sac was the housewife grapevine, a clandestine network as efficient as any modern-day social media platform. While today we might have the luxury of a well-timed text or a soft notification, back then, the news traveled through sugar-coated whispers shared over backyard fences. The local Tupperware party was less about plastic and more about passing on the latest tidbits of gossip. Mrs. O'Reilly was rumored to have used margarine instead of butter, and, the scandal it caused at last Sunday's church bake-off. In those days, reputation was a currency, and rumor was the neighborhood stock market. Should your family car appear in the driveway at an unusual hour, or your husband be caught mowing the lawn in his work suit instead of his weekend shorts, tongues would wag faster than a flag in a breeze. Yet, it wasn't only the world outside your front door that dictated reputation. Familial alliances had their own intricacies. The Tiddlywinks family, for example, were known for hosting perfectly tedious dinners that began promptly at 6 p.m., with a meatloaf so solid it could double as a doorstop. Meanwhile, the Jamesons down the street had a notorious penchant for dinner parties that ended in dances when the desserts were a little too spirited. Conversations at these gatherings often drifted into the gently competitive realm of who had the better washing machine. Was it the new deluxe Whirl-O-Matic with its graceful spin cycle, or the automatic washmaster, revered for its gentle handling of even the most fragile of undergarments? Such debates were the lifeblood of these gatherings, and much like today's hot takes on social media, each statement was met with pensive nods and sometimes a swift revision as soon as someone else made a valid point. However, amidst the gentle suburban wars and the ever-swaying reputation scales, there was a certain stability to the routine, a comforting predictability that lulled all into a sense of communal harmony. Here is where each day ended with the soft click of the television knob as families tuned into their favorite program, sipping cocoa that was mysteriously always at the perfect drinking temperature. And so, as you nestle deeper into your blankets, imagine the peaceful whispers of a world where the clink of milk bottles at dawn signaled the start of another perfectly ordinary day, where reputations would be tested and porridge would always find its way to the breakfast table just as surely as the morning sun. If these stories help you drift off, please subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world to me. And before you fully fade into dreamland, I would love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Let the hum of history quietly wrap around you as we gently turn the page to another slice of 1950s suburbia, where the dance of culture and community sways on. As evening casts its gentle cloak over the fictional suburbs of Cornersville, USA, circa 1956, we find ourselves meandering down quaint streets where every mailbox whispers secrets and every peony knows its neighbor's business better than its roots know the soil. In the 1950s, suburbia was less a place and more a stage where the midsummer air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and perfumed with whispers of whodunits spun from mundane realities. Life in these post-war suburbs, you see, was like a glorious sock hop of societal norms, replete with picket fences of varying heights, each picket representing unwritten rules of decency and decorum. But hop behind one of those fences, and you might encounter tales of grandeur, or at least tales of who borrowed whose Tupperware and hasn't given it back since Thanksgiving 2 years past. In Cornersville, reputation was as crucial as an ice-cold lemonade on a humid August afternoon. A dinner party host could rise to neighborhood stardom for their pineapple upside-down cake, while the poor soul who committed a fashion faux pas with mismatched socks might find themselves as the subject of hushed gossip in the church pews come Sunday morning. Oh, the scandals. Now, should you stroll down Elm Street, beyond Mrs. Henderson's immaculately trimmed roses, you might spot Mr. Wilbur Thompson meticulously washing his shiny new Packard. Mr. Thompson was a bank manager by weekday, but on weekends he was lord of the lawn, fiercely protective of its emerald blades. Neighborhood law declared war on any dandelion brave enough to breach his borders, armed with the latest in herbicidal warfare technology that made him the envy of the menfolk, or perhaps their collective irritant. His reputation was as neatly groomed as his Kentucky bluegrass, and woe to the child whose errant baseball dared to blemish it. Across the street from Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Agnes Barton was the reigning queen of rumors. Her telephone line hummed more than any beehive, as she wove tales and shared tidbits with the grace of a raconteur blessed with limitless minutes. She could transform the mundane recital of Little Jimmy's school play into a drama rivaling a Broadway opening night blunder. Agnes wielded her skill with the delicate precision of a Swiss watchmaker, shaping reputations as one might mold Jell-O salads. There's a certain comfort in this dormant world where dramatic events were largely self-contained. A child's wayward step into a neighbor's newly planted begonias became a saga to rival Greek myth, complete with solemn gatherings and indignant resolutions. And through all the hyperbolic chaos, there thrived an unspoken kinship, a shared understanding that everyone would have their turn in the neighborhood spotlight. The 1950s suburbs were indeed the cauldron where myths of modern manners brewed daily, seasoned by the fragrant spice of inevitable human imperfection. Each mailbox harbored a minefield of expectations, and each evening porchlight signaled more than a simple retreat from the darkness. It was a beacon for conversations that would secure or shatter social standing over casseroles and cocktails. As you nestle deeper into your sheets, dear listener, allow yourself to drift further into this tapestry of nostalgic peculiarities. Meandering down Cornersville's quiet lane, listen to the hum of cicadas harmonizing with human folly. Feel the gentle rustle of night breezes carrying secrets above manicured lawns. And just remember, in this idyllic realm of rumor and reputation, seldom was anything ever truly dull, except, perhaps, the knife needed to slice the pineapple upside-down cake. Floating softly, like a letter placed in the envelope of night, you might sense what awaits around the corner, woven into the fabric of the place, perpetually awaiting discovery beneath the whir of the ceiling fan and the whisper of dreams. Imagine, if you will, the quiet tranquility of a 1950s suburb. As the kitchen radio murmurs softly in the background, a symphony of birds synchronizes their morning chorus with the hum of milk trucks making their rounds. In this bucolic setting, reputations are as polished as the chrome on the new family Chevrolet, and gossip flows more freely than the coffee at block parties. Now allow me to introduce you to Mrs. Beatrice Haverford, the unofficial social arbiter of our quaint subdivision. With her impeccable taste in floral patterned curtain fabric and an uncanny ability to forecast neighborhood scandals as if she were a meteorologist for mayhem, Beatrice maintained her empire of influence with nothing but a rotary phone and relentless persistence. Hers was an era where news spread not through screens, but through nuanced nods and whispers over white picket fences. One sunny Thursday, Beatrice sipped her third cup of coffee. Truly, no woman under 5 feet 4 inches should consume that much caffeine. She stared intently out the window, her eyes narrowing on Mr. Johnson's freshly bought lawn gnome. The gnome, you see, was not just a flamboyant garden accessory, it was a bold statement in suburban one-upmanship. The arrival of this clay compatriot sparked a scandal more gripping than the latest serial on the radio. Mr. Johnson was swiftly declared the Sherlock Holmes of yard personalization, while Mrs. Johnson basked in her newfound celebrity as the hostess with the mostest, her Tupperware parties becoming the stuff of suburban legend. It was a simpler time when gossip was as essential to suburban life as the Sears catalogue. Yet beneath the levity, there was a subtle undercurrent of tension. A reputation was as fragile as the edges of a postman's carefully curated stack of mail. Take, for instance, the curious case of Mr. Anderson's front hedge. An ordinary morning transformed into a horticultural inquisition as rumors sprouted alongside the azaleas. Was it true that he clipped his begonias at night? Could you even trust a man who gardened under the cloak of darkness? The community was abuzz, and debate raged hotter than a TV dinner left in the oven too long. Though trivial, these whispers played a pivotal role in shaping the essence of suburban life. It was a clockwork dance of decorum and intrigue as neighbors balanced their desire for privacy with the unspoken tenet. Thou shalt always appear pleasant and presentable whilst discussing others' peculiarities. As the sweet breeze of the late afternoon reminded one of the warm embrace of a grandmother's quilt, Mrs. Haverford prepared for her most noteworthy venture yet, a guiltlessly elaborate soiree. She was determined to outshine every hostess from here to the next cul-de-sac. Her one hesitation lay in the centerpiece for the punch table. Was a flamingo ice sculpture too gauche or definitively chic? Little did she know, the sculpture would not be the centerpiece of gossip, but rather the absence of Mr. Whittle, whose rumored return from a mysterious trip was eagerly anticipated. Who was he visiting? An old army friend, or perhaps an encore of the spy novels he was often seen reading at the diner. The neighborhood thrummed with speculation. As twilight gently pulled its starry curtain across the sky, truth and perception mingled like strawberry gelatin in a mold, shaping a unique picture of interconnected lives. This nuanced tapestry of social chess games and interwoven stories was the real foundation of the 1950s suburb, sturdier even than the duplexes and driveways they inhabited. And so, while Mrs. Haverford clinked glasses with her guests and appraised her kingdom with subdued satisfaction, the suburban legend grew richer still, of gnomes and garrulous gatherings, of gardens tended by night, of whispers conjuring wonder and wariness alike. Our suburban saga continues to unravel, revealing secrets tucked beneath coiffed exteriors and trimmed hedges. As we drift further into the dreamy narratives that form an intricate pastiche of whispered legacies and bygone days, we find comfort in the silent snores of satisfied minds. Let us sink a little deeper now into the mysteries that lie just beyond the edge of this cozy reverie. In the gentle hum of 1950s American suburbia, life was as predictable as the rising sun. Houses stood like rows of pastel cupcakes, with lawns so pristine you'd think they were allergic to weeds. Each narrow street was a stage where the actors were neighbors, and the lines were crafted through whispers over hedges and chit-chats at the Sunday potluck. Reputation, you see, was the currency of these quiet realms. Allow me to guide you through the labyrinthine streets where Eleanor Adams was formidably known as the Queen of the Corner. Immaculate in her knee-length skirts and perpetually buoyant curls, Eleanor had mastered the steely art of discretion, knowing just the right amount of sugar to coat her words with when describing Mrs. Patterson's hauntingly predictable tuna casserole iterations. Rumor, much like the unwary garden gnome, had a life of its own in suburbia. It leapt from lips as light as a feather, yet landed with the weight of a grand piano. One fateful summer evening, Eleanor had glimpsed Mr. Henderson wearing something suspiciously unmasculine, a Hawaiian shirt. In our time, this might simply be deemed as an aesthetic exploration. But in the 1950s, that floral fabric carried the rebellious whiff of cosmopolitan flair, threatening local sensibilities. By Tuesday morning, the whole block was agog with tales of Mr. Henderson's potential double life. Coconut-scented candles were suddenly seen as a gateway to exotic scandal. Amidst these cotton candy clouds of conjecture, young Timmy O'Reilly was something of a legend at merely 8 years old. Known as the Canary of County Street, his bicycle had seen more mysteries than most private investigators. The echo of his bell announced both his presence and the Morse code of tabloid news, or at least what constituted news in the idyllic prime of 1952. One could rely on Timmy to narrate the peculiar spectacle of Mr. Thompson's lawn-mowing debacles or the curious case of Mrs. Hargrove's mysteriously vanishing poodles. with artistic flourishes that would make a suspense novelist tip their hat. To the unobservant eye, the neighborhood was a string of pearls, polished and uniform. Yet, beneath this polished veneer lurked the intrigue of the suburban macabre, like Mr. Johnson's garage, an alleged portal to a world of bowling pin trophies and perhaps menace, each teetering on the brink of some unforeseen competition of yesteryear. Or take Mrs. Campbell's front-facing window, always delicately veiled with lace curtains, but behind which was rumored to be her secret stash of canned pineapples from that one discount bonanza down at Miller's Mart. The older generation, wide-eyed and wise, often sat on their porches in the evening, their rockers singing lullabies of simple pleasures. They reminisced about days when virtue was its own reward and wondered at this newfangled notion of television interrupting evening walks and shuttering windows earlier every night. It was here that wisdom was quietly passed down, like heirloom crockery. Reputation was built slowly, like a good soufflé, and could fall just as swiftly if you so much as whispered near. Eat. In the woven tapestry of post-war bliss, the Housewives' Afternoon Bridge Club was the parliament of decision-makers. Each hand of cards dealt with silent judgment, as precise as a military operation. They mulled over fabric swatches and debated the progressive scandal of Mrs. Carlyle's decision to, dare I say, hire a gardener from outside the neighborhood. Gasps all around. These suburban sandcastles rested on delicate foundations of mutual esteem and hyperventilation-worthy gossip, draped in gingham pattern. Yet even as life so predictably played out its symphonies of constructed order, there was an unmistakable coziness in this world. As streetlights began flickering awake, they cast soft halos over perfectly mowed blades of grass, guarding secrets of small rebellions and grand exaggerations. The soft hum of a distant lawnmower was the suburban lullaby, serenading the neighborhood to its nightly domestic dreams. And as we drift further into this enchanted forest of faux pas and fur-bedecked dreams, perhaps the next row of pastel houses holds even more treasures of speculation and soft-spoken truths. A calm path through the whispering winds of suburbia awaits. Imagine gliding through a suburban neighborhood in the 1950s, where gossip traveled faster than a newspaper delivery boy on a bicycle with an extra pair of wheels. It was a time when homes had cars parked neatly in the driveway, lawns competitive enough for horticultural Olympics, and at least one nose pressed longingly against a neighbor's window frame. Social mobility, you see, was often fueled not by career advancement, but by the ebb and flow of reputation and rumor. Picture the women, dressed in floral prints and pearls despite being in their kitchens, whose telephonic trades in tall tales made the stock market seem quiet and collected. In these heady days of Eisenhower jackets and doo-wop groups, a whispered secret could spin through the neighborhood like the freshest of breezes. The great kitchen wars of the 1950s were primarily fought over recipes. Mrs. Henderson's tuna casserole, for instance, became legendary. It was said to contain a secret ingredient whispered about as much as the most scandalous Hollywood affair. Her neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, claimed the ingredient was a sprinkle of nutmeg, while old Mr. Thompson argued it was just salt. A novelty back then, what with refrigerators busily launching an assault on leftover sandwiches. For all intents and purposes, housewives gathered on porches for a delicate espionage mission under the guise of a morning chat, juggling suspense and celery sticks with equal flair. Their deals, however, were not all cold casseroles and gossip. There was the great fence paint incident of '52. Never had white picket lines caused such division. Mr. O'Leary down the street repainted his in blue, a color as foreign to fences as an interplanetary visitor at a garden party. Whispers flitted about. What did the blue A mean? Was it a code? Could it signal an allegiance to some otherworldly faction, or simply cover up for an overzealous spill when his car celebrated one too many victories at the clanking hands of the weekly oil change? These were the questions that kept people polite at Sunday gatherings. And of course, there were the rumors concocted expertly during the infamous neighborhood bridge club meetings. These gatherings were ostensibly about cards, but served as strategy sessions for controlling the information battlefield. Mrs. Jenkins, known for her impressive bulky ball skills and encyclopedic memory of B-list celebrity birthdays, speculated with a smile that Mr. Thompson's sudden acquisition of a new Cadillac still smelling of ride into greatness must mean he had a mysterious uncle with deep pockets, possibly European or more exotic yet, from Brooklyn. In our time today, we may scroll and swipe at rumors and reputations like digital sushi presented on blue-lit plates inside tiny glowing rectangles. But back then, the galaxy of suburban gossip was a seemingly endless spiral of handwritten notes, whispered conjectures, and lemonade-fueled covert operations that required actual face-to-face engagements, a practice some might find refreshingly vintage, like vinyl records or lava lamps. The task of painting a clear picture of one's social standing wasn't solely the responsibility of the spoken word. The cars, the landscaping, the very state of one's kitchen linoleum, it all told a story. Even Mrs. White, known for her truly exceptional hats, recognized the delicate pirouette between being known and being known about. It's difficult to say whether her hats inspired fascination or trepidation amongst her peers, but she wore them like shields, for who could hate a well-accessorized heroine? Thus, lifting a mid-century English garden, gazing ball to their ears, they tuned in to the brisk airwaves of rumor as expertly as an opera singer hitting that glorious high note, ready to serenade the world with whatever news had made the rounds that week. Such was life in the post-war suburbia, where a whisper might mold your destiny, as unpredictable as the radio with its nightly tales from afar. And so, as our suburban scenescape drifts softly into the twilight of reminiscence, imagine how dreams were woven from these delicate threads of hearsay, as if the very moon smiled down upon them. Rest assured, the fascinating journey continues in a world where every word still holds power, even if its currency is a bit dreamier than a suburban backyard. Now, with gentle hearts and eased minds, we glide further into these tales of suburban sorcery, where each chapter unfolds a new layer of our past's imperfect, delightful humanity. As the golden rays of a 1950s sun lazily stretched across perfectly manicured lawns, a peculiar dance unfolded every morning in the suburban jungle. It was a ritual marked not by the beating of tribal drums, but by the gentle hum of the milk truck and the jingles of the ice cream van. Each suburban street transformed into the stage for a daily parade of competitiveness and cordiality. The Suburban, keeping up with the Joneses, was more adrenaline-pumping than any soap opera, yet as soothing as a bedtime lullaby. Let me paint the scene. Arrettsville, a typical post-war suburb so uniform in its appearance that GPS had to apologize on multiple occasions for leading users into never-ending loops. Identical Cape Cods and ranch-style homes were punctuated by the one unique homeowner who dared paint their shutters Caribbean blue. But as Connie Baker knew, reputation in the 50s suburb hinged less on paint colors and more on the shade thrown by your window curtains. Connie, with her perpetual curler-adorned coiffure and an apron that seemed to have a master's degree in stain resistance, was the gatekeeper of gossip. She could see 3 houses down the street through a mere 2 inches of fabric slit in her Venetian blinds. The slightest flicker of gingham from her curtains promised her neighbors that a fresh platter of stories was on the menu, with a side of saccharine compliments. Despite the easy chatter, there was an art to crafting one's neighborhood narrative. For example, when Mr. Harris next door decided to switch from his traditional job as a milkman to pursuing the entrepreneurial might of selling life insurance, it wasn't just a career change. To Connie, it was akin to a deserting soldier, a matter of survival relevance, a spin on the batting cage of suburban hierarchy. Forget bylaws, the real governance here adhered to tales spun at majestic BBQ gatherings, where pot roast diplomacy was paramount. Rumors, my dear listeners, gained velocity through the clattering keys of typewriters and rotary dialing fingers. The prestigious ladies' luncheon club meetings, held in the likes of Gloria Robbins' whimsically wallpapered den, were terminological debates, enactments, often deciding if what happened was a faux pas or not, debate conclusions as official as congressional acts. If ever women were compared to birds, these tea parties were a gathering of the finest birds of paradise, nesting snugly in upholstered chairs, simultaneously delicately nibbling tea sandwiches and eviscerating reputations. The real Lincoln Continental of scandal arrived when Judith, the new woman from 2 streets over, suggested wearing pants to her own barbecue. Connie could hardly contain herself, conjecturing ecological repercussions like fabric pollution and neighborhood roughhousing when such was suggested at a recent council get-together. It was said with a chuckle, of course, for the 50s, among many whispers, was also an era of poised politeness and glasses of sweet lemonade. Such respectable rebellion wasn't always met with disdain, but curiously, and perhaps envy. Connie's daughters, Shelley and Nora, even took to riding bikes to Judith's house, seeking our wisdom from an unconventional matriarch. Was this influenced by Judith's rumored Olympic silverware, or her equally dexterous ability at card games? We'll never know. Ironically, cups of sugar genuinely passed over Judith's white picket fence, but so did novel seeds of change, which in time would morph the very nature of barbecue side dish debates. But stories like Judith's were gentle hurricanes, slowly transforming the landscape, while those like Connie witnessed with bemused acceptance. Here, history was hushed into existence by the rhythmic clinking of iced tea glasses and the occasional shout of "bingo" from the community center. Reputation and rumor, in the guise of friendly chatter, shaped more than opinions. It ushered progress through whispered revolutions and smiling revolts. Nights eventually swept Arrettsville in the kind embrace of twilight, as porch lights flickered on one by one, like fireflies in polite applause. Sleep enshrouded the homes in subtle surrender, with the stars as dreamy spectators to suburbia's secret symphony. As you drift into slumber, imagine a world where each street lamp holds a story, each quiet lawn keeps a secret, and each softly closing door carries whispers of quieter revolutions just waiting to unfold. In the gentle embrace of the 1950s American suburb, life moved at a pace unhurried, like the slow, deliberate swinging of a porch rocker. It was a time when families decorated their lives with neatly trimmed hedges and a polished sense of community spirit. But beneath this veneer of uniformity, the engine of social status hummed quietly, fueled by reputation and just a touch of well-placed rumor. Picture this: a typical suburban street on a typical late afternoon. The sky, stretched like a freshly ironed linen sheet, slowly cooled from blue to orange, hinting at the cosmos beyond the picket fences. Men in crisp suits and women in gingham dresses waved to neighbors, exchanging pleasantries that were often as polished as their silverware. In these exchanges lay the unspoken game of one-upmanship, where your grass wasn't just greener, but potentially the envy of the block. In the middle of Maple Lane stood the Wilsons, proud owners of bedroom suite number 5, a signifier of wealth and taste in burnished mahogany, adorned with doilies of lace and aspirations of grandeur. Mr. Wilson, a car insurance salesman who could sell a policy to a parked car, would tell anyone willing to listen that they were indeed the first to own the shining marvel, known as the dishwasher, a mechanical wonder promising hands free from suds and a future free from dishpan hands. Rumors, you see, were the currency of these leafy avenues. Mrs. Wilson, with the stealth of a house cat on a moonlit prowl, fueled this currency with an anecdote here, a discreet whisper there. With her fingertips firmly on the pulse of suburbia's gossip grapevine, she ensured her chronicles were foundations as sturdy as the brick veneers framing their ranch home. One warm evening at a neighborhood cocktail party, an affair where conversations bubbled more than the sparkling rosé and ice cubes clinked as musically as Rachmaninoff, the topic turned, as it often lamentably did, to the Wilsons' recent acquisition. "You'd think they'd won the lottery," murmured Mrs. Harrington, adjusting her apron and eyeing those without dishwashers, with a hint of superiority masked in sugared sweetness. Across the block, the reverberations of keeping up were distinctly heard. Mr. Thompson, caught up in the spirit of suburbia's mile-wide yet inch-deep rivalries, embarked on a quest of consumer retaliation. Soon, the Thompson family acquired a television set nearly as large as the living room wallpaper, where the flickering dance of black and white broadcast greeted every guest. The great television escalation had begun, yet these landmark acquisitions brought unexpected reputations. The Wilsons, purveyors of dishwashers, began to carry whispers of laziness in their wake. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson's grand television prompted pithy observations on an indulgent family, no longer participants in their children's homework, nor all things educational. And so, the rhythm of reputation continued its quiet symphony, a timed and calculated orchestra where notes of pride, envy, admiration, and judgment blended into a uniquely suburban concerto. The inhabitants of these pastel homesteads became the conductors, each waving their baton with the prowess known only to those who can discern wind direction by the smell of cut grass. On this particular evening, while the stars tiptoed into the evening sky, the Thompson children lay on the golden shag carpet, enraptured by the fluttering images of cowboys and horses. This suburban magic lantern cast shadows of dreams, stories taking flight with each muted explosion of six-shooters and galloping hooves. As the day neared its close and the silent night crept in, all dreams of new acquisitions and prestigious appliances tucked under eiderdown quilts, the subtle power of reputation and rumor spun softly through dreams and sleep. And with such gentle musings, it became evident that while the world outside might churn with unpredictability, Maple Lane, forever bound to its whispered secrets and silent judgments, slumbered on with the confidence of dreams wherein everyone truly had their place. Thus, with a whisper of greenery and the call of the nightingale, the universe unfolded into mysteries that would linger until morn, leaving the flicker of streetlights and the hush of suburban calm to promise yet another day. Suburban life in the 1950s was a genre all its own, like a slow-paced melodrama or perhaps the gentlest of black and white sitcoms. Picture a neatly trimmed hedge lining both sides of streets named after trees that didn't grow there. Underneath the milkman's whispered gossip and the newspaper boy's errant tosses lay the neighborhood's lifeblood, reputation, and rumor. Anne from Maple Street peered out her kitchen window as if expecting the secrets of the universe to pop up between her begonias. You see, the art of neighborhood myth-making wasn't for the faint-hearted. It required the stealth of a ninja and the social panache of a ballroom dancer, skills that Anne boasted with pride. Just a hop down the road was Ralph, king of the barbecue pit and master of the grapevine. Ralph could spin a tale faster than a tape deck rewinding, an analogy he often got wrong while explaining it specifically to his grandkids. Reputations aren't just born, he'd declare, waving a spatula like a magician's wand. They're cooked up right here on the grill, slow roasted to perfection. Whether by coincidence or serendipity, the juiciest stories curiously mirrored the meats Ralph would char, and undeniably, that lovely smoky scent came with a side of hot gossip. One particular season, the whole block was bawling over the supposed mystery of Mrs. Wimple's gnome collection. These gnomes were not just garden variety creatures. Oh no, they were an army of painted porcelain, each representing some far-off mythical European cousin with his own kit of quirky idiosyncrasies. It was whispered, mostly by Ralph, that these inanimate homemakers were secretly signaling ships, perhaps selectively anchored off the East Coast, or more often than not, plotting their midnight escape. And in the whispers of these suburban nights, the mysterious gnome plots deepened. Clarence, the respectable local librarian with an affinity for collecting verse more than the typewritten kind, claimed to have solved the enigma of their purpose. Strategic gnome placement, he announced during the annual potluck, as if declaring a search for a missing ceramic ambassador. Old Mrs. Wimple is subtly negotiating peace between two rival owls inhabiting her chimney. His rationale, while dubious, afforded him more +1s to parties than usual, especially with folks wanting merely to glimpse what artifact he'd pen that tale of strategic gnome diplomacy onto next. But behind every clever scheme, every whispered yarn, there often lay an unsuspecting, remarkably ordinary truth. And so, it was with Betty, ever the quiet one with an always kind word, residing in the cul-de-sac all its own. If Anne was the neighborhood's window, Betty was surely its mirror. Her garden parties provided the most amusing theater of suburban balance. It was whispered that Betty owned magical blueberry muffin recipes, ranking high alongside Anne's storytelling skills and Ralph's expertise in tantalizing ribs. On occasion, Betty could quell even Ralph's zest with a mere batch of her baked wonders. One dusky evening, over a melody of lazy crickets and Betty's specialty iced tea, a recipe zealously guarded under lock and key, Ralph noticed the secret to those gnomes wasn't Mrs. Wimple's stealthiness or any transcontinental espionage. Quite. Or simply, she'd been preventing random thefts by persnickety possums favoring their half-gnawed predecessor. The street was uneasily comforted knowing there were no clandestine packs with poultry or hidden treasures beneath Mr. Moss's merry manholes. Slowly, dreamily, the layers peeled away, leaving nothing but the cherubic innocence of a tight-knit community, narrated by baritones of sleepy whirs from their white picket fences. As the evening sun settled between sips of twilight and the lamps flickered on, stories kept brewing, simmering until the next potluck. And yet, somehow, the only certainty lingered that life's simple quirks were the truest tales. And speaking of blurry lines and fluid intrigue, there'd be more to weave in the threads of folklore, but now drift further into slumbers with histories untold, soothing and settling, as today's chapter vanishes into dreams. Rest easy, more awaits when morning light nudges. The 1950s suburb, a beguiling landscape of pastel, homes, perfectly manicured lawns, and the occasional rogue gnome conspiring from its ceramic perch. Legend has it that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you might still hear the faint echo of a telephone ringing off the hook, thrilling its holder with the latest morsel of neighborly intrigue. Welcome, dear listener, to another chapter in our whimsical exploration of how reputation and rumor crafted the peculiar tapestry of this halcyon decade. Imagine yourself wandering down a street lined with box-shaped homes as uniform as a baker's dozen. Each driveway sports a shiny, finned vehicle that appears to be nosediving into the concrete, stopped just short of its reckless mission. Inside one of these cozy abodes, Mrs. Myrtle Winterbottom, armed with a telephone receiver, composed her daily thesis of suburbia's undercurrent happenings with all the zeal of a spy novelist crafting their opus. You see, before the digital age, when information could travel at the speed of light, or at least as fast as your Wi-Fi connection on a good day, the telephone was both a lifeline and a tool of serene disruption. It bound womenfolk together in a web of whispers, casting shadows aplenty over anyone unfortunate enough to miss the weekly book club meeting. Now one might wonder how these book clubs functioned under the guise of literary endeavors while their participants wove tales rivaling any crime novel's intrigue. The reality is, while the book list might boast classics like Pride and Prejudice or Moby Dick, the real bestseller was the latest chapter in Mrs. Pennyfeather's continuous saga involving her neighbor, Mr. Dingleberry, and his suspiciously growing collection of garden gnomes. To those uninitiated, Mr. Dingleberry's gnome obsession might appear merely an innocent, albeit peculiar, hobby. However, under the Suburban magnifier, it became a spectacle of almost mythic proportions. Rumor had it, as rumors often do, that these gnomes were secretly coded, signals to an underground network of garden gnome enthusiasts, or a club far more thrilling than it had any right to be. Even more captivating was how these innocuous tidbits traveled, phone chain by phone chain, until everyone from Mrs. Hubbard to young Timmy at the lemonade stand had an opinion about those beguiling garden statues. In one particular instance, the absent-minded forgetting of a pie in an oven became the spark for a rumor so outrageous, it almost convinced half the block that little Timmy was about to be abducted, not into any ordinary van, but into an alien spacecraft disguised, perhaps predictably, as a giant meatloaf. If you think this suburbia sounds fantastical, consider the real-world parallel of Lucy Ricardo's escapades on I Love Lucy. In the show, Lucy frequently embroiled herself in mishaps that the neighborhood described in breathless tones, echoing real communities where the unforeseen incident would garnish coffee cups and telephone wires until its last ember had cooled. You see, in these post-war neighborhoods, reputation was your calling card, your unchanging introduction, and in a world bereft of Google, first impressions could stretch long and threadbare before crumbling. No small wonder, then, that wives in kitten heels could wield reputations with the deftness of wielding their husband's checkbook. Gossip was currency, and one learned quickly, never to spend it unwisely. But as the crimson sun sets over this sleepy little exploration, let your eyelids flutter softly as you imagine the world shifting aplenty. The era of flamingos on front lawns may have dimmed, but reputation and rumor remain timeless travelers, weaving yet another tapestry, whether across telephone wires or virtual echoes. So, dear dreamer, let your mind drift further as the cool night air nudges the secrets of suburbia, past and present, into the whispering wind, hinting ever so gently at stories yet untold. Drift now into slumber, for the path ahead continues to unwind. The 1950s. A decade where televisions were bulky, Tupperware had mystical allure, and reputations in the suburbs could be as fragile as Grandma's best porcelain. While everyone was busy keeping up with the Joneses, a certain spice of life thrived in those tree-lined neighborhoods. Gossip. It was the real-time social network, the ultimate game of telephone where facts started strong and ended up as distorted as a funhouse mirror image. Picture it now, a quaint suburban street with neatly trimmed hedges that were just low enough to watch the neighbors. It was a time when backyard fences were opinions that could easily be swayed with enough cheerful chatter over a white picket boundary. And of course, the stories they could whisper or shout formed the grand dance of reputation and rumor. Let's imagine the protagonist of tonight's sleepy tale, Mrs. Harriet Thompson, a woman who wore her title of Suburban social commentator as proudly as a new Easter bonnet. Harriet, with her cat's eye glasses perched perfectly on a nose that seemed perpetually pointed toward potential scandal, was not just any resident of Maple Lane. She was the lifeline of every conversation that ever stretched across a cul-de-sac. It was said, mostly by Harriet herself, that she had eyes in the back of her head, metaphorical ones, obviously, designed to spot the inklings of gossip as effectively as radar tracking Santa on Christmas Eve. Harriet was convinced that the true essence of any suburb lay not in bricks and mortar, but in whispers and rumors that flowed more reliably than the town's water supply. In those halcyon days of the 50s, what you did mattered less than what was said about what you did, exaggerated for effect, and then retold with a knowing nod. A simple exchange over borrowed sugar could easily transform into the riveting tale of how Mrs. Fields was stockpiling for the end times. Harriet was the maestro of these tales. Today, we find her crafting a masterpiece over a cup of coffee and a freshly baked plate of accusations. Cookies. Her latest subject of speculation, Mr. George Sanders, the new neighbor with a fondness for gardening at odd hours. Naturally, the clink of his metal shovel in the moonlit hours wasn't disastrous insomnia, but clear evidence he was digging up his yard for hidden treasure, or perhaps a perennial patch of particularly sneaky tomatoes. The fact that Mr. Sanders had recently returned from an overseas trip only added to the intrigue. Even the most mundane explanation would quickly turn as slippery as an eel wearing buttered shoes. Probably involved with spies, Harriet mused dramatically to her friend Maggie over rotary phone calls that could rival any Shakespearean play for dramatic flair. While Harriet operated in the realm of delicious conjecture, the rest of Maple Lane often danced to her tune. In doing so, they helped shape not only George's misunderstood reputation, but created an entire community ethos built around lively murmurs. Though amusing, and sometimes astonishing, The effect on suburban life was profound yet subtle. In these sleepy pockets of post-war prosperity, reputation could be the making or the downfall of one's social calendar. After all, who in their right mind wanted to keep company with someone rumored to be harboring a fugitive coffee maker from Europe? Harriet Thompson's whimsical flair for hyperbole suited her role as self-elected neighborhood bard. Her accounts were fascinating, not just for their foray into the fictional extremes, but for how they mirrored the very new frontier America was cautiously stepping toward, one balanced on advancement and anxiety, on innovation and the fear of the unknown. As soft evening light paints a warm curtain over Maple Lane, Harriet's tales become quieter. Tonight, her whispers retreat back behind her closed blinds. As you let these stories lull you deeper into tranquility, feel the gentle coziness, a kind of nostalgic conformity so different from today's pace. Just as George Sanders isn't uprooting daffodils in the dark, neither should your thoughts stray from rest. With our dear Harriet's voice humming a gentle lullaby of suburban life, relax deeply and dream peacefully. Let the gentle hum of lawnmowers and the rustle of whispered tales drift you toward where dreams are nurtured and stories become dreams. The 1950s, an era of polished cars, pristine lawns, and perfectly coiffed hair. It was a time when reputation in the suburban universe was as fragile as a soap bubble hovering above a freshly mowed lawn. One minute, you're the king of cookout conversations. The next, you're the subject of whispered reverie behind the azaleas. Let's paint a picture of this peculiar playground of propriety. Picture Debbie, suburban goddess of casserole artistry, who had the impeccable skill of siphoning whispers as efficiently as gossip. Columnist Hedda Hopper. Her eyes could spot a fashion faux pas from a mile away, and her ears. Rumor has it they could hear a pin drop in a shag carpet. But it wasn't just about what you heard in the 50s. It was what you could suggestively hint at while tinkering with your Tupperware. One could say that the neighborhood block parties were less about community bonding and more like auditions for the latest suspense thriller. Reputation, after all, was not built on concrete driveways, but rather on the ephemeral clouds of cleverly concocted hospitality. And in this decade, when pastel-colored fridges were still the height of innovation, a snide comment could bake longer than a Sunday afternoon ham. Observe the ritual of passing a neighbor's white picket fence. The trick was to maintain your gaze at just the right angle of interest, not too direct so as to appear nosy, and not too aloof to ignore the perfectly synchronized act of lawn mowing. The Sullivans' sudden switch to an automatic mower. Why? That was nothing short of headline news. Discussions would whirl on like a rinsing cycle, wondering if their adoption of new technology meant they were climbing the social ladder, or perhaps compensating for something else. Then there's Frank, the affable mailman with an uncanny knack for subtle innuendo, delivering more than just letters. It's said his brisk walk was matched only by his brisk delivery of scandal. His route was a tapestry of whispered tales woven with paper and ink. To Frank, every envelope was a story, meticulously sealed and sent, though the truth slipped out through every crease he crafted with his careful hands. At work, office water coolers were more like diplomatic summits where whispers of suburbia's soap opera filtered alongside idle chatter about the looming Cold War. Was Helen's immaculate garden a front for nefarious activities? Never mind that espionage was more likely brewing behind closed government buildings than amongst begonias. Yet the sheer thrill of hypothesizing was unparalleled. Dinner parties were arenas, the circulating platters of shrimp cocktail mere conduits for tales spicier than the sauces being served. A compliment like, "What a lovely jello salad," could very well be a thinly veiled armistice in the stubborn stalemate that was PTA disagreements. Someone's absence at the bridge club could be dissected with surgical precision until all that was left was an impeccably folded napkin of innuendo. Why, neighbors in the know could even orchestrate an intricate dance of hedge trimming to the soothing rhythm of suburban gossip. It was a beautifully synchronized dance of suspicion and savoir-faire. And as you drift off into the dreamscape, consider the 1950s as a theatrical stage where every immaculate house was a set, every neighbor a performer in the grand play of life and reputation, with each act bringing its own blend of hilarity, heart, and hemming of reality. Rest easy, my dear listener, as you float to the cadence of crickets and distant mower drone. Know that the saga continues to unfold beyond the edges of this narrative, as whispers of other tales and lives echo softly in the corridors of slumber. Close your eyes gently and let the calm current carry you to the threshold of another story, yet to unfold in the soft twilight wash of our nostalgic sojourn. As the moon gently kissed the rooftops of 1950s suburbia, another chilly evening descended upon streets lined with prim hedges and pastel-colored homes. Behind closed doors, beneath floral curtains, whispered conversations about reputations danced like fireflies in the warm glow of kitchen lights. It was a peculiar ecosystem, this suburban enclave, where the real news was neither written nor broadcast, but stitched together through a network far more complex and delicate than a spider's web, the suburban rumor mill. Imagine, if you will, a typical block party on Sunnyside Lane. Beneath a canopy of paper lanterns and the upbeat tunes of a swing band, neighbors mingled. Yet, while the lemonade was sweet, the gossip was even sweeter, delivered with a splash of keen observation and a twist of cheeky speculation. Birth of a new scandal? Well, that required the precision akin to a Swiss watchmaker, combined with the creativity of a jazz improvisation. Take Mrs. McAllister, for instance. Known for her immaculate garden, she was also famous for her precious black book. But instead of celebrity contacts, it contained a detailed catalogue of neighborhood curiosities, like the time she noted with glee that Mrs. Henderson's milk was inexplicably delivered one Thursday at 3 p.m., when deliveries typically happened at dawn. Coincidence? Not in Mrs. McAllister's estimation. The neighborhood interpreted this event with all the significance of an international espionage tale. The conclusion? Perhaps Mrs. Henderson was attempting to elude an audience with the milkman. Or perhaps something more clandestine was afoot involving unscheduled milk. Neighborhood reputations could rise and fall with such seemingly trivial tidbits. It was a time when whispers carried weight heavier than lead, and a bemused observation about an unplucked weed could burgeon into an epic about domestic neglect. An unkempt lawn, after all, suggested either a rebellious spirit or one teetering on the precipice of social decay. During the week, while the menfolk disappeared into the city, leaving hollow homes like cicada shells. The women spun tales as they hung laundry on the line, creating tapestries of legend out of the most mundane threads. Here, the art of storytelling was refined daily, with enough dramatic flair to rival classical theatre. One only had to murmur the words, "Did you hear?" And instantly, ears perked with rabid curiosity. And so, reputations were born and sustained in glorious, intricate detail. Of course, timing was everything, and one had to employ the right kind of daylight, never too fluorescent or judgmental, lest a friendly chat morph into an inquisition. Mrs. Harris became synonymous with a certain chocolate chip cookie recipe, her secret ingredient uttered in hushed reverence, akin to passing down an ancestral treasure map. Her famous cookies, however, were a subject shrouded in more secrecy than Roswell and consumed with just as much fervor. What was it about these savory tidbits of suburban life that ignited such impassioned discourse? Perhaps it was the way they embellished the walls of everyday life with lively hues, turning beige canvases into vivid murals. Or maybe it was simply that nothing hoists the sails of drowsy domesticity better than a northern gale of well-spun gossip. And so these slumberous settlements thrived on perception and persuasion, where the color of your drapes could hint at unspeakable eccentricity, and where one's choice of garden statue could create endless speculation. What secrets did the smiling gnome conceal behind its chipped paint and benevolent demeanor? As the night stretched its arms wide like a yawn, welcoming the quietude, Dreams of these suburban tales drifted through the open windows and into sleeping ears. With their gentle rustlings, they lulled the neighborhood into peaceful slumber, nestling alongside every pillow, whispering of both today's revelations and tomorrow's adventures. And so we leave Sunnyside Lane, where even the blades of grass sighed deeply in their sleep, carried adrift on stories yet told, and rumors on the brink of fruition. Because after all, in suburban living, nothing is quite as exhilarating as the warmth of knowing and being known. The legacy of whispered secrets and reputations is but the beginning of another chapter's reverie, just a breath away from this moonlit eve's end. As the mid-afternoon sun slouched lazily behind the picket fence horizon, casting elongated shadows reminiscent of suburban fortresses, the cozy hamlet of Middle Creek thrived in a kind of orderly chaos. Reputation flickered like a porchlight on a sultry evening, both illuminating and obscuring the social dance of life in the 1950s neighborhood. Women flitted between kitchens and gardens, their well-coiffed silhouettes orchestrating a symphony of whispers, made all the more clandestine by the sighing leaves and the occasional chirp of a nosy sparrow. The art of conversation in the 50s was akin to a genteel fencing match, a duel fought with raised eyebrows and carefully seared words. Mrs. Gladys Thompson, holder of the neighborhood's unofficial title, Queen of the Teapot Telethon, wielded her teaspoon like a maestro's baton. Her home was a perpetual flurry of tea parties where the menu served up more gossip than sandwiches. Today's luncheon topic? The scandalously short grass of Mr. Jenkins's lawn, evidently a metaphor for his all-too-evident shortness in the morals department. A neatly trimmed hedge of neighborly deceit, if ever there. Auric was one. In that world, true to its time as a land of shadows behind gleaming white smiles, reputation was as fragile as a soap bubble hovering over a cake, and possibly as transient. Rumor, the town's real estate mogul, expanded faster than Mrs. Carruthers' famously rising sourdough. Imaginary real estate, of course, since in those sanctimonious circles, rumor was the only currency that could outperform the soaring prices of post-war American suburbia. Within the domestic bastion of 1950s homes, children lived in a parallel universe, performing gravity-defying feats on swings while silently absorbing the universe of grown-up words measured cautiously around dinner tables. The Jones children, notorious for using the mother of all rhetorical devices, the knock-knock joke, upgraded their comedic armor regularly. Practiced as fierce gladiators of jest, they were ever ready to defend their familial honor, sometimes with a punchline sharp enough to earn a sideways look from Fairfawn Road's self-appointed family archivist, old Mr. Learington. In Middle Creek, the young and the less young negotiated elegantly chaotic hours filled with unscripted small-town dramas, each laced with talk-of-the-town flair. The soapbox derby on Birch Street should have been as quaint and predictable as Grandma's apple pie recipe. But no, the event unfolded with as many turns as a twisty-turny roller coaster, thanks to the addition of Mrs. Butterfield's particularly exuberant motivational chants for her son Tommy, who sailed past the finish line with all the grace of a well-launched canoe. The onlookers, both rival racers and parents guffawing softly behind cotton handkerchiefs, couldn't decide whether to award him a trophy or the keys to the good humor man's truck for making the neighborhood smile. In this era of carefully curated perfection, it should be noted that there might still have been a few imperfections, considered by the more astute among residents as extra sprinkles on the cupcake called life. For instance, Mr. Arnold's habit of leaving his garden gnomes facing east instead of west, a trivial deviation fraught with existential significance at the neighborhood bridge club. Members speculated on everything from his political affiliations to his nighttime reading habits of mystery novels, unbeknownst to them, as thrilling as watching beige paint dry. Through the sepia lens of interesting normalcy, the very existence of Middle Creek teetered on the warm, breezy line between mundane and extraordinary, a dichotomy lost on no one and everyone at once. As twilight inchwormed its way into the alleys and overgrown gardens, the town settled back, comfortably ensconced in its time-worn traditions, where every word spoken carried with it a penchant for the gloriously banal. Perhaps it was this embrace of the beautifully bland that ensured the town was not an accidental footnote in history, but rather a gently humorous marker within the sprawling dreamscape of everyday American life. As the stars took their positions and shadows merged into the sleepy-hearted landscape, a gentle cricket orchestra began its performance, another chapter of whispered memories gently closing, only to be dreamt anew with the tick-tock whisper of another day, in the lull of 1950s Suburbia, where white picket fences were the sinewy threads weaving together a tapestry of neighborly intrigue. Reputations were as fragile as an overdone souffle. In these halcyon days, before the bombardment of social media feeds, how did one standing in the community become a topic of both secretive whispers and boisterous backyard chatter? Imagine, if you will, a place where keeping up with the Joneses was less about flashy cars and more about the neighborly art of espionage, albeit disguised as an innocent chat over the freshly hung laundry. Picture a neighborhood like Oakwood Drive, where Mrs. Henderson's freshly baked apple pie was the cover for gleaning the latest scoop on who had switched to instant coffee and who was still grinding their beans with purpose and pride. In those days, the fertile ground for rumors was oftentimes laid at seemingly innocuous locales. The local beauty salon, its floral wallpaper clinging to the walls like bits of gossip themselves, was the epicenter of information exchange. It was here, under the hum of hairdryers and the gentle snip of scissors, that the fate of reputations danced on the threads of curling hair. Mrs. Ethel Crenshaw, the salon's respected oracle, could recount the nuances of a doorstep conversation with the fervor of a Shakespearean play. Ethel, once an aspiring stage actress before her dreams were dashed by reality's penchant for pragmatism, had an uncanny ability to weave tales more intricately than the most seasoned weavers of her time. While sipping her tea, a tepid affair mostly composed of exaggerated sighs and lemon wedges, Ethel would speculate on the meaning behind surprising floral deliveries. "Why," she whispered conspiratorially to a rapt audience, "the lilacs sent to the Patterson place must surely be for more than Mrs. Patterson's fondness for fragrant blooms." And thus, under her carefully pinned curls, an odyssey of imagined liaisons blossomed unfettered. Meanwhile, in the modest yet alarmingly fertile grounds of the local PTA meetings, Mrs. Garrett wielded her clipboard with solemn authority. Mrs. Garrett, whose attire was never without pragmatic pockets filled with tissues and stamped bishop's coupons, could smother a salacious tale with her starched composure faster than you can say home economics. Her meetings were breeding grounds for both community initiatives and subtle rumors, often reined in with the seamless application of Robert's Rules of Order, or her own version thereof. It was at one such gathering that word circulated about Mr. Thompson's late-night forays to install the latest gadget in his garage, a rudimentary remote control that enabled both garage doors and imaginations, a delightfully conspiratorial bamboozlement. Was Mr. Thompson inventing for convenience, or creating a ruse to mask clandestine gatherings of a mysterious nature? Naturally, speculation climbed as assuredly as a crooked vine ascends a trellis, and so, tucked into those suburban crevices, amidst the background hum of cicadas and patchy AM radio channels, landscapes of rumor and reputation were crafted by an unending parade of everyday dramatists. Their scripts, while lacking in true menace or malice, provided a comforting and often exaggerated landscape for the real-life tiresomeness of lawn mowing and grocery shopping. As twilight settled over Oakwood Drive, those neighboring deans of domesticity, ushers of bedsheets and harbingers of social tidbits, found themselves reconvening over garden fences. And there, under a canopy of darkening skies and fireflies resembling forgotten stars on their way to twinkling destinies, tales and rumors were woven anew with threads of delight and playfulness. The tranquility of suburbia may have been its own intricate facade, yet inside this calmer-than-quiet abode, reputations flitted on the wings of mundane magnificence. Secrets tickled the echoing corners of placid living rooms, and everyone settled into the sundown sum of their whispered stories, as snug and inviting as the most wholesome of knitted Afghans. And with that, The night settled comfortably around those charming lanes, drawing curtains across life's stage, eager for the dawning of another day when the gossip game would be renewed once more. But there, nestled amidst the suburban musings, lies another tale awaiting in the chapters ahead. A tapestry of secrets, stories, and whispered whimsies yet to unfold in wondrous, gentle humor. Ever wonder what kept the wheels of suburbia spinning in the 1950s? Was it the newfangled electric mixers or the wondrous contraptions they called television sets? While those did help grease the proverbial axle, the truth is much simpler and less mechanical. It was reputation and its trusty sidekick, rumor, performing a delicate dance akin to the jitterbug, a dance that swayed even the staunchest heart of the white picket-fenced utopia. Take Mrs. Beatrice Thimbleton, for example, a stalwart of Lannell Street's social hierarchy, and a name whispered so often that it ricocheted off every wall from the butcher's to the bowling alley. You see, in the delicate suburban ecosystem, Mrs. Thimbleton's good graces were as vital as fresh milk and Saturday night gin rummy. Her weekly bridge game was less about cards and more about linguistic acrobatics, as neighbors jockeyed not for a winning hand, but a winning reputation. There she would sit, at her resplendent mahogany table, shuffling the cards with a flair that suggested profound wisdom, or, at the very least, a nod to Houdini. Mrs. Thimbleton was a master at spinning tales, with a single eyebrow raise. Rumor had it she once raised both eyebrows, but that's an anecdote for another chapter. As gossip fluttered around like a whimsical breeze, impacting perfectly manicured lawns and echoing through the neighborhood, it became clear that suburbia's obsession with reputation was less about vanity and more akin to a sport. There were strategies, points to be scored, and of course, playoffs in the form of annual bake-offs and charity galas. Each, "Do you remember the time when?" was a verbal trophy gleaming in Mrs. Thimbleton's social cabinet. Of course, reputations weren't crafted solely at the bridge table. No, real enhancement was achieved in the domain of block parties. Here, within the festively lined streets, paper streamers serving as the arbiter of who borrowed whose lawn gnome, individuals polished their personas and exchanged light-hearted banter over deviled eggs that bore witness to more secrets than some US senators. The ebullient sound of the latest Elvis track provided the soundtrack as each neighbor fought to maintain their standing through a delicate balance of homemade lemonade and scrutinizing each other's choice in footwear. Interestingly, some folks reveled less in reputation than in the shenanigans of the rumor itself. No soul was wholly innocent in this dalliance. Even the ever-punctual Mr. Fredrickson occasionally dabbled with rumors, once mischievously suggesting that the mailman had roots in espionage, merely due to his impeccable timing and secretive manner of delivering parcels before sunrise. The tale unfurled with whispers and grew a life of its own, blossoming with each retelling until it became a regular talking point for the afternoon over the clattering of teacups. These whispered tales were powerful. One might recall the infamous episode with the O'Reillys' missing lawn flamingo, a mystery that tied minds in knots tighter than a 1950s necktie. Was it misplaced? Abducted by aliens who had a penchant for kitschy decor? The theories laid bare were a testament to suburbia's creative prowess, each version more bewildering than the last. It was eventually found safely ensconced in Mrs. Thimbleton's garage, an oversight, she claimed, of the highest order. Her reputation untouched because sometimes the benefits of a good rumor, it seemed, delicately concealed truthful little faux pas. As evening descended upon this realm of whispered musings and the streetlights cast long shadows that seemed to nod approvingly, one could not help but ponder the tapestry these stories wove. Each tale, each reputation-building gambit, added to life's grand mosaic, an important piece to the community puzzle that ensured every resident of this 1950s landscape felt somewhat like the protagonist in their own quieter, serialized drama. But as our eyes grow heavier, lulled by the rhythmic tales of yesteryear, we meander onwards, ready to trace the next delicate thread in this dreamscape tapestry. What whimsical capers could await in the adjoining neighborhoods, tucked just beyond the sleep charmer's horizon? Picture this, dear dreamers, a blanket of stars draping over the neatly squared plots of the suburban 1950s landscape. Tall tales and truths threaded tightly together like the perfectly pleated curtains in each identical little house. It's here we find our hero of the hour, Mrs. Evelyn P. Whitaker, patron saint of porch gossip and undisputed queen of the cul-de-sac. Now, Evelyn was not your average homemaker. With her keen eye for scandalous detail and a nose more attuned to sniffing out faux pas than any hound dog, she wielded a power greater than those snappy flip phones kids use these days. She had the power of reputation. Yes, in the 1950s, reputation could be as delicate as lace doilies adorning living room armrests, prone to dust, hard to maintain, but so very essential to the picture-perfect domestic display. Evelyn didn't need the latest issue of Good Housekeeping to tell her about Mrs. Connolly's overcooked pot roast, or that Mr. Jansen down the street put premium gasoline in his Chevrolet despite it sputtering like a tractor. Oh no, her intel came from the old-fashioned information network buzzing with secrets and whispers. Her bridge club. The bridge-playing ladies of these post-war suburbs wielded rumor like a well-dealt hand, their shuffling gossip delivered with the precision of a finely timed trick-taking game. In this tangible dream world, lawns were the battlefields for status, with perfectly manicured grass signaling triumph. The Vewall family, newcomers to Maplewood Lane, understood this fact all too well. Their lawn mowed to a height just shy of perfection was noted, both in Evelyn's little black book and under the sharp lens of her peering spectacles. In a place where uniformity was mightier than creativity, the V's choice of a daring azalea bush against the backdrop of predictable hedges spiraled into stargaze speculation about their intentions. Word had it, whispered between sips of iced tea, that perhaps they were artists in disguise. Of course, Mrs. Whitaker's observations weren't sinister. In her mind, she was a curator of cultural heritage, a custodian of the community's collective character. Families were chapters in a larger, suburb-wide saga, each with their own moral. Keep your front windows glinting under moonlight, and always polish your reputation to a shine. Looking back now, one might say Evelyn was a pioneer of crowdsourced news, before hashtags and homepages were even twinkles in a developer's eye. Her efforts kept balance in the court of public opinion, much like the jello molds precariously perched on tiered dessert trays at the neighborhood supper club. Ah, but on one breezy summer evening, something remarkable happened. Ms. Lila Garcia, a widow who lived a few doors down, caused quite the hullabaloo by painting her front door a vivid shade of turquoise, an act so bold it could have launched 1,000 debates at city council meetings. The hue illuminated the block, a bright deviation from the muted conformity. Yet, instead of dismay, the neighbors admired the audacity as a refreshing change. The icy veil of monotony melted ever so slightly, revealing a glimmering new perspective. Evelyn, glancing through her Venetian blinds, smiled. She understood then that life beneath suburban skies was a living tapestry, vibrant and unique when allowed to be. Her lofty position as the reigning regent of gossip hadn't been for naught. It paved the way to appreciating unexpected colors in the dawn of conformity days. Evelyn realized she wasn't just listening to stories, she was a story herself, part of an ever-unfolding narrative written in whispers and witticisms. And so, dear listeners, as your eyes begin to feel heavy and your thoughts drift like leaves floating down a gentle stream, remember this: even the smallest of ripples can make waves in the quiet seas of suburbia. Gently settle into the comfort of your pillow, for our voyage through whispered histories and whispered dreams finds pause here tonight, ever so softly rolling into the next chapter of our slumbering saga. Picture this. It's a breezy Saturday afternoon in the 1950s suburbs, and the most thrilling event on the street is Helen's tea party. Helen's backyard is the epicenter of mid-century prestige, where the rose bushes, trimmed with mathematical precision, serve as silent spectators to the delightful drama that unfolds amongst clinking cups and not-so-accidentally dropped secrets. Back in the 50s, building one's reputation was an art form, requiring just the right balance of casseroles and casual gossip. Adding to this tapestry of societal choreography, Helen always ensured that there was freshly churned rumor butter on the table. A necessity, one might say, ready to be spread thin over the toast of neighborhood life. This collection of husbands, wives, and occasionally curious cats wasn't just about the tea. It was about orchestrating whispers with the grace of a synchronized swimmer. Helen, as the self-appointed maestro, could tune a rumor to the exact note where curiosity and disbelief harmonized perfectly. Her latest symphony, whispered over a particularly strong batch of Earl Grey, was the mysterious new ailment called televisionitis, rumored to be contracted from prolonged exposure to the latest household marvel, the television set. Now, you see, televisionitis was said to manifest with symptoms ranging from square eyes and furnitureitis, a condition causing one to unwillingly become part of their couch, to a compulsive disorder to hum advertising jingles at breakfast. A whisper here, a nod there, and suddenly Mr. and Mrs. Peterson's little Timmy was the subject of the latest neighborhood concern after it was noted he had brought a jingle or two into Sunday school. Backyard. Narratives like these weren't just transitory notes in the suburbs' humdrum symphony. They were livelier than the day's most popular soap operas, with Helen directing each idle lineage of gossip with nothing short of artistic genius. Her ability to distribute information was almost as legendary as her recipe for pineapple upside-down cake, both of which had become staples of local identity. But oh, don't let this charming facade fool you, for the Tea Party circuit was also the battleground of the most genteel espionage. A quick bathroom break was never innocuous. It was a strategic move to survey the magazines tucked under Helen's coffee table. Did she really get them from the exclusive book club? Or could they be something that only dared to masquerade as culture? Even as the sun began to cast longer shadows over Helen's suburban fiefdom, her guests lingered, their chatty whispers changing with the golden hues of the afternoon light. Noticeably, however, these gatherings weren't just for the sharing of last night's mysteries involving mystery meatloaf recipes, but rather acted as a social glue that bound this close-knit community. And winding these rumors through Helen's skillful hands, they crafted the intricate patterns of acceptance, belonging, and sometimes a devilishly playful exclusion. Somewhere between the fourth story about Mrs. Watson's new hairdo that's supposedly defying gravity and logic, our tired narrator feels a gentle twinge of premonition hinting at a change in the air, or perhaps another cuppa brewed to perfection. See, reputation and rumor, much like the color of your latest Tupperware set, influence the rhythm of suburban life. Examination of these exchanges is akin to tracing the roots of a bush that hasn't quite grown as much as it has flourished under careful nurturing. And so, as the gentle rustling of reputational leaves settles, let the night tickle the edges of your imagination, promising more labyrinthine tales of suburbia just beyond the dreams waiting for you on the other side of slumber. Picture this. It's a languid summer afternoon in the 1950s suburban paradise. The cicadas are detuning their orchestral overture, and the neighbor's sprinkler is desperately trying to impersonate a refreshing rain shower. In this idyllic setting, reputations were as fragile and sought after as Mrs. Wainwright's secret casserole recipe, just one whisper away from unraveling into chaos, or worse, a dinner party disaster. Houses stood bedecked like pastel cakes, orderly rows of conformity with a twist of quirk hidden behind curtains. Yet the true epicenter of neighborhood dynamics was the mailbox, a silent but stoic custodian of missives, both mundane and mysterious. Irregular folding of a letter, a personalized seal. These were the catalysts of intrigue. But nothing quickened the suburban heart quite like a letter addressed to someone else, but unintentionally delivered to your mailbox. A harmless mistake, of course. The true art of suburban espionage, though, was the backyard fence conversation, a gentle sprinkle of casual gossip flitting between talks of pruning techniques and the peculiar habits of the new family on Maple Street. How exactly did Mr. Thompson afford that shiny new convertible? And why was Mrs. Green always drying her laundry at night? Answers might have lain hidden in plain sight, but asking directly would be as crude as showing up to the garden club with plastic flowers. Suburban mums were CIA-level operators when it came to steering social reputations with a mere raise of an eyebrow or an extra spoonful of sugar in the neighborhood bake-off contest. Little Susie is just thriving at piano lessons, one might say, inferring that little Susie's talent wasn't the only thing thriving, but probably her mother's competitive streak as well. Despite its reputation for tranquility, suburbia was a vibrant ecosystem of unspoken rules and subtle gestures. Much like the greenery that residents fiercely tended, reputations needed nurturing, lest they wither under the scorching sun of prattle. The art of reputation management often required a touch of whimsy and a spoonful of harmless deceit. It wasn't exactly forgery, perhaps just painting within the lines with a splash of imagination. Television, the new shiny oracle of information, beamed ways to be and things to have, reinforcing the 1950s version of a DIY story arc for one's life. The Joneses weren't just proverbial, they were often real people. Just a few houses down on Elm, with an impossibly green lawn and an even more impossibly perfect white picket fence. Rumor had it that if you were pursuing that prefect hedge symmetry, you'd try to casually catch Cindy Lou in her culottes, trimming the lilacs. Her lilacs bragged a certain polish, not from a magic touch, but perhaps from an accidental sharing of gardening supplies during a neighborhood tit-for-tat exchange. And then, there was the enduring love affair with the weekend barbecue, where the honor of hosting reigned supreme. One's ability to grill a hot dog without charred ruins became an art form in its own right. But even more crucial was the art of conversation, maneuvering the fine line between informative and incisive. There, reputations simmered along with the potato salad debates over store-bought versus homemade. There was a delicate dance of whispered reputations, tending more towards choreography than chaos. Like the perfect sock hop, everyone knew when to step in and when to step gracefully aside. Ironically, it was perhaps these shared secrets, kept and never told, that held the tight-knit fabric of the community together. As another day drifted lazily across the landscape of levity and quiet curiosity, the sun began its descent. The neighborhood readied itself for the symphony of cicadas, and the quiet whir of electric fans singing tunes of tranquility in unison. The neighborhood sagas, murmured with the hum of bedtime stories, laid to rest alongside restless dreams about larger-than-life coffins and smaller-than-life waistlines. Reputation and rumor, endlessly shaping the craft of suburbia, whispered until everyone fell asleep, leaving only the night to stand vigil over the Namakwa daisies and secrets softly sown into gardens of good intentions. And as whispers turn to dreams, we glide effortlessly into the next chapter, making our way through the twilight of suburban tales where reputations and reality entwine once again. As dawn crept into the backyards of 1950s suburbia, the sleepy towns were a theater of domestic tranquility, where reputations glided smoothly over manicured lawns and rumors fluttered through the community like a gentle breeze rustling through newly planted maple trees. Our journey today visits one particularly peculiar corner of suburbia, a little slice of post-war paradise where lawns were always trimmed to perfection and hedges trimmed as diligently as any weekly haircut. In these neighborhoods, reputation was as critical as a well-timed delivery of the milkman. Everyone knew that the hue of your house matter, the precise shade of pastel paint adorning your matchbox-like abode, could spark speculation fiercer than the great gossip incident of '57, involving a mysterious, neighborly exchange of petunias. Ah yes, paint choices could suggest everything from a mere flirtation with modernity to a full-blown existential crisis wherein purple reigned supreme as the misunderstood monarch of hues. But reputations were not just about the visible landmarks on your property. Oh no, the suburban safari was one where even the smallest cues, a flicker of new curtains or an uncharacteristically cheery wave to the postman, carved mountains out of mundane molehills. The inevitable Tuesday morning coffee clubs were the unfailing courtrooms of public opinion, where every crumb of information was chewed over like the most intricately spun wool. It was in settings such as these that the art of the whisper blossomed. Imagine, if you will, Doris, an unassuming resident of Maple Lane, a lane ironically devoid of maples. Doris had recently taken to a particularly lively shade of garden gnome. These pint-sized statues, sprouting in semi-stealth behind her perfectly symmetrical rose bushes, were a small rebellion against the ever-present monotony of her perfectly mirrored neighbors. However, among the rivaling factions of suburbia's gossip aficionados, this was interpreted as nothing short of a bold statement of individualism. Rumors flew that Doris was exploring the avant-garde movement, a notion both terrifying and titillating for her peers. In this atmosphere, reputation danced precariously on the delicate tightrope of public perception. One moment you were the idyllic image sketched in the glossy spreads of a kitchen appliance catalogue. The next, you fell into the rumbling discord of suburban scandal because you accidentally missorted your recycling bins, a modern-day woe unto thee, if ever there was one. The humble dinner parties and hearty church picnics transformed into strategic gatherings where alliances were casually formed over deviled eggs and potato salad. It wasn't merely what you did, but who you handed the salt shaker to, or how you complimented the hostess's choices in curtain fabric, crucial elements in the meticulous marionette show of social standing. Peering deeper into these historical suburban ecosystems, confounding rumors became the natural currency of social distinction. Consider the mini-drama of Alfred, a local mailman whose mystique was built on a single mysterious package mishap. One Saturday, when meeting at the weekly Rotary bake sale, Mrs. Watkins shared her theory with great aplomb. Alfred, she claimed, was the proud owner of a secret vineyard. Was it possible? Had the ink-stained bag slung across his shoulders delivered bottles of rare vintages cloaked as innocent correspondence? The theory spread like wildfire, and though purely speculative, the very thrill of its absurdity made it far too delightful to resist. And so life swayed on amidst the muted hues and rumbling station wagons, where vagaries of rumors and ripples of reputation sculpted the subtle seasonality of the community. These tales, woven with the threads of truth and imagination, acted as the communal lullaby, an enduring ode to curious camaraderie and shared stories that embraced a culture of conspiratorial hospitality. As the finishing hues of dusk enveloped the town, settling upon the neatly arranged sidewalks, our tale pauses here for just a moment. Rest your eyes and let the suburban stories of yore dance gently into the dreams of your own peaceful suburb, to be continued with the awakening of tomorrow's dawn. In the well-manicured tapestry of the 1950s suburbs, it wasn't just the hedges that were carefully trimmed and shaped to perfection. Reputations danced on the same precarious balance. The sun made its lazy descent over cul-de-sacs and cookie-cutter homes, suffusing the world with a golden glow tinged with hints of impending dinner aromas. Picture, if you will, folks in their living rooms, arranging their atoms of reputation like one might rearrange those quaint novelty items, delicately placed on mantels and shelves just a notch above their true significance. But the 1950s were prime time for those subtle yet potent forces of gossip. Imagine suburban communications like a well-baked loaf, warm and crusty on the outside with a soft, chewy center composed of true intentions and fabrications alike. You see, the suburbs were a social petri dish where secrets thrived and rumors effortlessly coursed through the winding streets, typically faster than a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air, in no small part thanks to a charming modern convenience we might call the telephone tree. These leafy conduits of chatter and conjecture twined their way through neighborhoods with an efficiency any switchboard operator would envy. It was essentially Bluetooth before its time, only much more high-pitched and decidedly less accurate. Dial the right neighbor, and the whole street would know who recently purchased a new Hoover vacuum, just as swiftly as they'd know whose hedge trimmings had accidentally revealed an old, rusty bicycle that had once powered 1,000 childhood adventures. But let's not be too harsh. Rumor had a peculiar role, gently knitting the cozy fabric of life together, as implausible as that sounds. A mischievous stitch here, an endearing pearl there, weaving intrigue into the otherwise evenly hemmed existence of suburbia. Was it true about Mrs. Gladys from Maple Street, painting her lounge a delightful pastel yellow because she had accidentally opened the wrong tin? Or that Mr. Jenkins never mowed his lawn on Wednesdays? Not because of superstition, but simply due to poor planning. These stories weren't just orally circulated headlines. They were the ambient hum of life, grounding impossible expectations with relatable folly. And here, amid these whispered legends, one Mr. Albert Thistleton found himself an unwitting participant in a tale spun entirely without his say-so. Known for his predictable penchant for pot roast and a rather enviable collection of bow ties, his reputation inadvertently embarked upon a wild, unauthorized vacation, courtesy of his neighbor, the infamous Miss Dorothy McCutcheon. Now, Miss McCutcheon was the undisputed queen of observation, particularly the kind that required peering over one's hedges while discreetly watering her geraniums. She had a flair for dramatization, more suited to a dime novel than a quiet cul-de-sac. Discussing Albert's immaculate collection, she offhandedly mentioned at the weekly bridge game how his taste in tartans suggested a man of international mystery. She may or may not have implied he might have been a spy in his youth. And really, how thrilling was that? Without social media influencers to shape the narrative, Miss McCutcheon's fanciful embellishments were a stampede, and the bridge club took the tale and ran with it, card game abandoned mere moments later. Before you could say, double for a small slam, the legend of Albert Thistleton had blossomed to unexpectedly vibrant hues within a fortnight. He became, in everyone's mind, a pivotal character in a BBC drama that didn't exist because television hadn't caught up with their imaginations yet. Of course, when questioned by those curious about his supposed clandestine past, Albert himself remained blissfully unaware. He was, as usual, more preoccupied with the angle of his Windsor knot than with espionage. Yet he bore the legend with characteristic good nature and found his otherwise perfectly steaming cup of Earl Grey, flavored with an unexpected hint of savoir-faire. As twilight settled over those agreeable houses, with their picturesque white picket fences, both reputations and rumors carried on resolutely, night after night. It was an understanding as old as the towns themselves, cradling the sleep of dreamers who tucked away each fanciful story, a warming quilt peppered with little secrets and grand tales, and how serenely they drifted off, wrapped snugly in the soothing embrace of suburban myth and reality, blending seamlessly into dreams where they too were stars of their own delightful sagas. And as you rest your own weary head, think of the stars making their own gentle gossip across the night sky, whispering tales yet to be told and dreams yet to be dreamt, waiting patiently for the dawn to weave its next chapter. As the twilight fades and the gentle hum of crickets becomes the lullaby of the night, we find ourselves drifting back once more to the golden hue of the 1950s suburbs. A place where every lawn is perfectly manicured, every curtain neatly drawn, and reputations are as neatly polished as a pair of Sunday shoes. It's a world where the Joneses are more than just neighbors. They're a measuring stick for one's own existence, and rumor flutters through the air like leaves in a gentle autumn breeze. In these neighborhoods, reputation was as crucial as your morning cup of joe. But how, you might wonder, did such a seemingly tranquil place become a hotbed of whispered secrets and note-passing at the fence? Well, my dear fellow dreamer, it turns out that in the absence of high-speed internet, the grapevine was as robust as a top 6 television cable network rollout. Consider, if you will, the archetypal suburban housewife, queen of her castle and mistress of multitasking. During this time, her domain stretched from the awning of the fresh, from the factory car in the driveway, to the mint green kitchen where she could be found effortlessly whipping up the next Jell-O mold. Despite her busy schedule of ironing husband Hank's shirts and planning the next meeting of the bridge club, Her ear was finely tuned to the frequency of the neighborhood's goings-on. In an era when the advent of refrigeration was yet to put a firm foot on the neck of the icebox, women like Margaret Barton became the telephone operators of tattletales. They knew who was revamping their vinyl flooring and which husband was spotted at the city's new tiki bar, a wee bit too late on a Wednesday. Her phone would ring with the regularity of a top 40 hit, and, let's be honest, the local news she offered was as flavorful as the casserole of the week. While one might imagine that spreading rumors was something done with malicious intent, within these perfectly aligned rows of modest homes, it took on a life of its own. It was the suburban pastime, rivaled only by bowling at the local lanes or selecting the latest color of Chevys. A hint of lipstick shade here, the wrong brand of tobacco there, and one could find themselves amidst a gentle storm of speculation that was, more often than not, unfounded sipping of over-sugared tea. But let's not forget the menfolk, the breadwinners who felt the pulse of suburbia in a different beat. Zigging in with their news from the office, they served as the nighttime news anchors once they settled back home on the recliner with a newspaper and a pipe. Hushed voices would convene on the matters surrounding Jeff's sudden preference for working late, or generally gesturing toward the linoleum-glossed living room as a stage of conversational theatre, where stories were spun with the same flourish as a Jerry Lewis comedy skit. Our perceptions were shaped by bits of barely concealed eavesdropping and the passive-aggressive notes left amidst casseroles exchanged at church potlucks. These were the silent but potent markers that constructed or deconstructed one's societal standing. Picture the pews filled on a Sunday, a sea of pastel dresses and neatly parted hair, each nod, each wave. An exchange of unspoken, "I know what you did," or perhaps, "Have you heard?" Indeed, it wasn't just church organ reverberations shaking from the wooden paneling, but also whispers of everything from last night's PTA faux pas to Mr. Turner's latest lawn care debacle. Reputations in this time melded with an inextricable dependency on both spectacle and secrecy, their preservation a full-time behind-the-drapes endeavor. Yet amidst these often cartoonish exchanges, bonds were forged like the special sauce in a hamburger, an acquired taste. But once you have it, you'd never go back. As you tuck this chapter into the pillow of your mind, imagine the dreams of 50s dwellers, visions of perfectly trimmed hedges and friendly waves, all marinated in good-natured gossip. With the suburban moonlight gently whispering goodnight, we slip deeper into this cozy reverie, holding the iridescent luster of reputations and rumors close to our hearts, whispering secrets into the dawn's early light. The 1950s suburb was a peculiar universe, governed by an intricate web of whispers and reputations as delicate and precarious as a house of cards. Picture, if you will, the neat rows of identical homes standing to attention like a line of soldiers, each watching over the next with an unblinking eye. Within this regimented world, reputations could turn on a dime, or, perhaps more fittingly for the era, on a nickel polished to a shine. In this world, a mere quirk in habit could spark wildfires of chatter more vigorous than the postman's daily rounds. Take Mrs. Penelope Wentworth, for instance, who lived on the corner of Maple Street and everyone's curious mind. In a neighborhood where lawn mowing was synchronized to a precision that would make Swiss clocks envious, Penelope, the delightful rogue, decided to cultivate a garden that would have made the hanging gardens of Babylon weep with envy. Her sunflowers towered over hedgerows like natural sentinels keeping watch over the land of the anodyne. Rumors about her, peculiar gardening choices abounded. Some whispered she was a botanist masquerading as a homemaker, researching an elaborate conspiracy to increase the pollen count. Others thought she communicated with extraterrestrials using Morse code, cleverly disguised as rows of radishes. How easily a tulip could tiptoe into tales of interstellar intrigue. Meanwhile, Monday mornings at the Ladies' Bridge Club were a delicate waltz of gossip and card deals. With fingers adorned with rings that clinked melodiously against porcelain teacups, suburbanites exchanged intelligence like Cold War spies. It was said Mrs. Clara Beasley once accidentally served Earl Grey from the wrong side of town. A faux pas, so shocking it reverberated through the bridges of conversation for weeks. Clara would have been quite content blending in with the floral wallpaper were it not for her pièce de résistance, a heritage tea set passed down from none other than Queen Victoria's third cousin twice removed, or so. She claimed with a wink more practice than a double agent's escape plan. Then there was the peculiar saga of Mr. Harold Jenkins and his fondness for what he declared was the latest technological marvel, known today as the television set. The Jenkins household was the first on the block to install this mystical box. It contained tiny people who performed tirelessly before the sight of anyone who dared to watch. The peculiar light that flickered through the windows late in the evening bewildered many. Was Harold entertaining, perchance, tiny wizards, conducting nightly seances in which they conversed eagerly with shadows and static? It took only a few episodes of I Love Lucy for the cul-de-sac to succumb to the charms of televised absurdity, a pastime ordered as uniformly as their haircuts and hemlines. The ebb and flow of these tales were as rhythmic as the gentle clanging of cowbells on a distant hill. Uniform lives, defined and yet enriched by such whimsical chatter, flowed calmly into tides of quiet compared to our modern cacophony. It's as if these communities, stitched together by the threads of shared imaginings and soft-spoken tales, knit together blankets of comfort under which a growing suburban nation nestled, safe and somewhat sound asleep. And underneath the whispers lay a comfort, a reassurance in the melodious banter, hinting that the humanity weaved between oddity and idiosyncrasy. Mayhap these echoing tales lent the suburbs a depth beyond the hush of vinyl records playing over dinner and the clinking of glasses on Formica countertops. As our sleep story continues to wend its way through the alleys and avenues of post-war suburbia, we'll see how these quaint tales of reputation gradually gave way to newfound liberation and challenges. So let the gentle circles of sounds and stories wrap around you like a cozy quilt of dreams. As slumber catches your tired eyes, it is the haze of tomorrow's stories you'll begin to feel nestled in. The 1950s suburbs, a time when lawns were manicured, neighbors waved consistently and enthusiastically, and the air was perfumed with the quiet tension of who had the better Tupperware collection. Back when television sets were a status symbol rather than a cause for existential dread, suburbia bustled like a beehive where each resident was a curious, gossip-hungry bee. It was an era where reputation and rumor were not just idle chatter, they were the currency in which suburban life was traded. Picture, if you will, our protagonist of Kitchen Whispers, the archetypal 1950s housewife, whom we shall affectionately call Doris Daydream. Doris's day began with a pot of percolated coffee that was never quite strong enough to combat the fog of local hearsay swirling through her mind. Every morning, she donned her favorite polka dot dress and marched to her post, the picket fence, a location as sacred to the transmission of news as a state broadcaster's microphone. It was there that Doris would engage in a form of social table tennis, artfully volleying tidbits with her neighbor Madeline. Did you hear about Joan's new dishwasher? I can't believe Beverly has hired a maid. It was all part of a vibrant ecosystem of rumors, where what someone bought, did or didn't do was as much a matter of public interest as the outcome of a local bake-off. Doris's reputation as a broker of suburban secrets was second only to Madeline's keen reporting, though their relationship remained amicably competitive. One might wonder where the men fit into this tapestry of whisperings and winks. Fear not, they were not immune to the contagion of community intrigue. At the backyard barbecue, a different kind of smoke wafted through the air, one of ego and one-upmanship. Here, gentlemen would discuss who had the best lawnmower or the most fuel-efficient car, each exchange punctuated by hearty laughter and knowing nods. It was widely believed in the neighborhood that whoever possessed the new station wagon was indeed living the suburban dream. Yet, beneath the surface, each chuckle carried the weight of envy. Or perhaps it was just the beans talking. Reputations, you see, were crafted with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, albeit sometimes wound a bit too tight. Neighborhood legends were born not merely from grand achievements, but from meticulously curated narratives. Mrs. Henderson was the local culinary queen only because of a well-timed appearance in the community cookbook. Mr. Thompson was the grill master, not simply because of his rib recipe, but because he controlled the charcoal in such a way that minimal soot landed on the pristine patio. It was these small crowns of social standing that turned mere residence into household law. The telephone also played an essential role in this low-stakes game of thrones. Installed typically in the busiest room of the house, this device was the ultimate lifeline in maintaining one's standing and house perception. The walls of many homes could likely share secret confessions if only they had ears. A misplaced whisper into the rotary's mouthpiece could topple one standing faster than a lawn chair in a gust of suburban Sunday breeze. Yet, for all the gentle absurdity, it is worth remembering the warmth behind these quirky social routines. Each snippet of conversation was an olive branch of connection, a way for neighbors to stitch themselves into each other's lives. Suburbia was an intricate tapestry, each thread an individual story, adding to the colorful mosaic of community life. And as Doris peered through her curtains at the sunset, she couldn't help but smile. Reputation and rumor, for all their frivolity, had woven this little nook of the world into something more meaningful than any single washing machine or automobile ever could. Something lasting. Now, dear dreamer, allow this cadence of community to linger softly in your mind as we turn towards the gentle conclusion of our suburban sojourn. Let the hum of those 50s streets twinkle like distant stars in your imagination as you drift peacefully into the final chapter, where we shall close the blinds on this era of intrigue and idle chatter. May your thoughts sail upon the soothing waves of time as the gentle promise of sleep embraces you. As the tale of reputation and rumor in the realm of 1950s suburbia culminates, we find ourselves ambling gently down the winding lanes of nostalgia. These lanes hold secrets hidden in prim hedgerows and freshly painted mailboxes, where impeccably manicured lawns are silent witnesses to the quirks of post-war life. Picture, if you will, a dusk settling softly over a cul-de-sac, where each modest home is a bastion of prosperity and quiet competition. At number 47, Mrs. Gladys Witherspoon peers covertly from behind her kitchen curtains. Oh, the tales those gingham drapes could tell. Tonight, they frame the scene of yet another suburban rite, the twilight, a barbecue. Each home is its own universe of ambitions and anxieties, with every porch light a beacon signaling its own saga. As Mrs. Witherspoon's husband, Bert, meticulously flips hamburgers, the aroma wafts through the neighborhood, mingling with the scent of freshly cut grass, a smell as quintessentially suburban as gossip itself. Ah, the 1950s barbecue, a culinary theater where social standings were seasoned as liberally as the burgers. Here, neighborhood legends were born, some true, others as fabricated as the faux wood paneling that graced many a living room. The subtle dance of reputation often revolved around who hosted and who attended these backyard soirees. Wasn't it whispered among the azaleas that the Sinclair family had upgraded to a charcoal grill that could cook 50 burgers at once? Surely a status symbol that would make even Henry Ford jealous, or perhaps concerned. As the twilight deepens, fireflies flicker like misplaced stars, and Mr. Frampton, from across the street, approaches, a self-declared expert in everything from baseball scores to the integrity of local bridge champions. His favorite pastime, embellishing stories with the finesse of a jazz musician spinning an impromptu melody. "Did you hear?" he begins, his voice as smooth as the top-shelf bourbon concealed in his tailored jacket. "About the Thompsons' tomato plants. The zucchinis are twice the usual size. Some say they've discovered a secret fertilizer recipe. Others suspect a saucy rendezvous with the local greengrocer." Such whispers, blending fact with whimsy, sailed through the suburban streets on the gentle wings of imagination. Gladys Witherspoon, her curiosity piqued, made a mental note to stroll past the Thompsons' Victory Garden come morning. The evening rolls on with the comforting predictability of a train rattling toward its terminus. The gentle clatter of dishes, the soft murmur of friendly debate. Was that Babe Ruth the greatest of all time? Or was Joe, DiMaggio, edging him out? Their discussion spirals lazily upward, like the smoke from a forgotten cigarette in a long-ago noir film. In these exchanges, reputation wasn't just a currency. It was a living testament to one's standing in the vast suburban universe, a tapestry woven with threads of triumph and the occasional slice of humble pie, served alongside the cobbler. At last, the gathering subsides, and the evening's chatter quiets to a few lingering anecdotes told in whispers as soft as a lullaby. Porch swings creak in the stillness, bearing witness to the balmy night, and one by one, yellow lights flicker off until only an occasional glow hints at the secrets held within. As we draw the curtain on this quaint theatre of life, the world outside fades gently into the embrace of the suburban night. Gradually, even the most diligent neighborhood watchdog, gnawing contentedly on a smuggled barbecue morsel, sighs into sleep. Let your mind rest easy as the crickets serenade the twinkling stars, and the worries of the 1950s slip quietly into the reservoir of dreams. Alone with the rhythm of your own gentle breath, drift softly into that most peaceful of places, where history and dreamland entwine, perfectly balanced on the brink of today and the promise of tomorrow.